Well, the government funding for this plan comes from the Treasury's Troubled Asset Relief Programme, or TARP. Now, it was approved in late 2008 when George Bush was still president. The TARP bailout will cost the US taxpayer $700 billion. And government spending doesn't end there. In February, the US president approved a $787 billion stimulus package. And last week, the US Federal Reserve announced it was to pump up to $1 trillion into the economy through a controversial method known as quantitative easing, which critics liken to the government essentially printing money. Well, let's go to Washington now, where we can talk to Korok Ray, an economist and professor from the School of Business at Georgetown University. Mr. Ray, thanks very much for being with us. The markets have been responding, some would say, positively. What's your view of the plan?
Thank you, Julie. It's a pleasure to be here. I actually am very happy with the program. I believe it's one of the better things that the administration has done, and it solves the old problem with the asset purchases, which is at what price should the government buy these assets. The public-private partnership uses market forces to determine the price, and that's the right way to do it. And I think this scheme, while it seems a little complicated, is actually quite good.
Mr. Ray, we had a guest earlier, and I just want to tell you something they said to us and get your reaction. Our guest was saying that the future for banks is basically that they'll sit there, having been stuffed full of money, doing nothing until that they're satisfied that their positions have been rebuilt sufficiently. Is that the future after all of this money being pumped in, as you see it?
I don't see it that way. I do believe that the source of the credit crunch are these toxic assets that are sitting on bank balance sheets. And the reason that it's so important is that because they can't at the moment sell these assets to the private sector, there's very little credit flowing in the economy. Now, once these assets are sold and they sort of disperse throughout the economy, the balance sheet of the bank effectively opens up. It has a lot more room to breathe, and then the banks can resume all the other forms of lending that are critical in an economy, such as consumer lending, student loan lending, credit cards, lending to corporations. Once that lending takes place, what will happen is that a firm can then borrow money and then make an investment, like build a plant, and that plant will require new workers, and that's how this will create jobs.
Mr. Ray, some people seem to be nervous that there doesn't seem to be any sort of plan for a long-term, overhaul of the financial landscape. But I believe that is planned at some stage.
Yes, I am completely sympathetic to that view. This plan is almost purely a short-term solution. Imagine that a patient is on the operating table. This is an emergency treatment just to get the patient to stabilize. Over time, the government will need to come up with a plan which is analogous to a diet and exercise plan for the U.S. economy. That means looking carefully at the financial regulation, the system, and understanding where the structural weaknesses are and seeking to rectify that as necessary.
And what about
that is definitely necessary. And
I'm sorry, I interrupted you there, Mr. Ray. I just want to ask you quickly, what about Mr. Geithner? He's come in for some real flack, hasn't he, over the past month or so? Do you think he'll weather this particular storm?
I do think he actually will weather this storm, partly because this last plan is in my opinion, it's quite good, and it uses market forces, and it's headed in the right direction. I think he got stuck with some bad luck with his own back taxes and with the AIG bonus scandal. That was sort of bad luck on that in the beginning of his administration. But I do think he'll recover, and I think him and also Lawrence Summers in the National Economic Council are a solid team.
Mr. Ray, thanks very much for joining us. Korok Ray there in Washington, D.C.